As the Second World War came to an end, the world began to fully comprehend the atrocities committed in the Nazi concentration camps. The Stutthof concentration camp, established in 1939 near Gdańsk, Poland, was one of the many sites of terror during the Holocaust. The camp operated from September 2, 1939 to May 9, 1945, and housed more than 110,000 prisoners, including Jews, political prisoners, Soviet POWs, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. Tens of thousands of prisoners died there from starvation, disease, forced labor, and execution. Among those who played a role in these horrors were female guards, whose actions were later subject to judicial and historical scrutiny. On July 4, 1946, 200,000 people in Gdańsk gathered to witness the executions of former guards of the Stutthof concentration camp. High upon the Biskupia Górka Hill, a group of female guards, found guilty of crimes against humanity, were brought out to meet their fate.
Let's unveil the secrets of time.
From Stutthof to the gallows, the justified execution of parodies. Stutthof, a notorious concentration camp, opened shortly after World War II began. In 1944, the number of inmates surged, particularly with Jewish prisoners from camps like Auschwitz. To manage the increased population, new guards were recruited, many from the local area. Conditions at Stutthof were deplorable, with starvation, disease, and epidemics like typhus claiming thousands of lives. Daily executions were routine, carried out by firing squads and gas chambers, with some prisoners brutally beaten to death by the guards. An estimated 65,000 people were killed in Stutthof, many through forced labor. Stutthof's operations were managed by both male and female guards, with the latter proving to be just as brutal as their male counterparts. Many of the female guards at Stutthof participated in the infamous selections, where prisoners were chosen for immediate execution or forced labor. These guards also oversaw the appalling living conditions, engaged in the abuse of prisoners, and sometimes took part in direct acts of violence. Their post-war trials would expose the full extent of their cruelty. One of the female guards, Parodies, was drafted in August 1944. Known for her brutality, Parodies trained as an Aufseherin or overseer at the Stutthof SK3 camp. She quickly developed a reputation for cruelty, often beating prisoners with a whip or other weapons. After completing her training, she was appointed as a wardress. By October 1944, she was transferred to the Bromberg Ost subcamp of Stutthof, and in January 1945, she returned to the main Stutthof camp. In April 1945, Parodies was involved in one of the final transports of female prisoners to the Lauenburg subcamp, after which she fled. A prisoner in her capture recounted she was put on trial as a defendant in the Stutthof trial. One witness testified,
"She ordered a group of female prisoners to undress in the freezing cold of winter and then doused them with ice-cold water. When the women moved, Parodies beat them."
The widely recognized Nuremberg trials primarily focused on the evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the leadership of the Third Reich, with concentration camps serving as key evidence. In addition to these prominent trials, a number of lesser-known proceedings targeted the staff of various concentration camps. Poland conducted 4 trials in Gdańsk, specifically aimed at former guards and kapos from Stutthof, prosecuting them for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Stutthof trials were a series of dramatic war crimes tribunals held in post-war Poland, aimed at bringing to justice those responsible for the horrific murders of up to 85,000 prisoners at the Stutthof concentration camp during the Nazi occupation of Poland in World War II. Despite the gravity of their crimes, none of the Stutthof commandants were tried within Poland. Notably, SS Sturmbannführer Max Pauli faced trial not for his role at Stutthof, but for his command of the Neuengamme concentration camp in Hamburg. He was executed in 1946, though his trial did not address the atrocities at Stutthof. The first of these Polish trials took place in Gdańsk from April 25th to May 31st, 1946. Following this, additional sessions were held at the same court on October 8th to 31st and November 5th to 10th, with the final session for that year running from November 19th to 29th. A fifth trial occurred in Toruń in 1949, and the sixth and final trial in Poland was held in Gdańsk in 1953. Out of the approximately 2,000 SS personnel who operated the camp complex, 72 SS officers and 6 female overseers were ultimately brought to justice. On July 4, 1946, Ewa Paradis, at just 25 years old, was executed on Biskupia Górka Hill. A massive set of gallows was erected for the occasion. As the truck moved away, leaving her suspended from the gallows, it took several minutes for her to die from strangulation. She was one of many female guards who turned to extreme brutality in the concentration camps. The decision to hold public executions was controversial, but was justified at the time by the need to demonstrate that justice had been served for the millions of lives lost in the Holocaust. These women, who had once wielded power over life and death within the camps, were now facing their own demise in a similarly public and brutal manner. From devotion to death, the brutal execution of Elizabeth Becker. Elizabeth Becker was born on July 20th, 1923, in Danzig. Her family was German, and as the Nazis rose to power, she joined the League of German Girls, the female wing of the Nazi Party. This organization was the only state-sanctioned youth group for girls in Nazi Germany, with compulsory membership. At its peak, it had over 4.5 million members. The League indoctrinated girls with Nazi ideology, training them for roles in German society as wives, mothers, and housewives, in line with Hitler's vision of women as loyal bearers of children for the Reich. The girls were taught Nazi songs, underwent physical training, and participated in large sports events. The organization also encouraged loyalty to the Nazi regime over one's family, and members were required to complete a year of land service, working on farms to demonstrate their dedication. At the outbreak of World War II, the League justified the invasion of Poland as a punishment for so-called subhuman people, ramping up Nazi propaganda. Many girls from the League sought careers within Nazi institutions, including the SS and concentration camps. Notable members like Irma Grese, who would later become infamous for her brutality in the camps, were shaped by this indoctrination. Becker joined the League at the age of 13, becoming a devoted Nazi, likely influenced by her family. By 1938, at the age of 15, she began working as a tram conductor in her hometown of Danzig. She also held various jobs in local businesses and worked as an agricultural assistant, staying close to home throughout her early career. As the war progressed and local men were drafted, the SS began recruiting women to work in concentration camps. Adverts were placed in towns and cities, calling for women to train as guards. Becker responded, possibly due to limited options, and was assigned to the Stutthof concentration camp. Stutthof was established following the invasion of Poland and became a full concentration camp by 1942. Initially small, it was later expanded with 30 new barracks, a crematorium, and a gas chamber in 1943 to facilitate mass executions. The camp housed Polish prisoners and others targeted by the Nazis, with thousands suffering brutal conditions.
Then you walked out and they said "Anziehen," meaning get dressed. These were the striped horror clothes. If anybody had put dress with nails on the inside on you, that's what it would have felt like. They scratched you to pieces. You didn't have fat on you, at least I didn't. It scratched and made my skin bleed. That's what you put on. Over there is a row with what they called shoes. They were wooden soles with flat boots. Nobody cared what size you needed. You put those on and you went. All I kept looking for was where are the others, my sister and mother. That was my total worry.
Becker, alongside notorious female guards like Jenny Wanda Bachmann and Anna Birkenthal, became known for her involvement in the camp's transports of women, and men were sent from camps like Auschwitz to Stutthof, where conditions were extremely harsh. Tens of thousands succumbed to starvation and disease epidemics sweeping through the camp. Executions were regularly carried out, with many prisoners being shot or gassed. Inmates also suffered at the hands of medical staff, who injected sick prisoners with phenol to kill them, and guards who brutally beat prisoners to death. The forced labor imposed on inmates was grueling, with insufficient rations provided for the work they were made to do. Elisabeth Becker, a guard at Stutthof, gained a reputation for her brutality. Despite being in her early 20s, she instilled such fear that many female prisoners were reluctant to even look her in the eye. As a staunch Nazi, Becker was involved in the daily selection process, where weak or sick inmates were chosen to be sent to the gas chambers. Her actions resulted in the deaths of many women and children. After the war, numerous female guards, including Becker, were tried for their roles in these atrocities. Becker continued working at Stutthof until she fled on January 15, 1945, fearing capture by advancing enemies. She was eventually arrested by Polish authorities and imprisoned while awaiting trial. In the first Stutthof trial, held in Danzig, Becker faced charges alongside 5 other women. Witnesses testified to her brutality and her role in selecting prisoners for execution. Becker confessed to selecting at least 30 women for the gas chambers. Becker wrote multiple letters to Polish President Bolesław Bierut, appealing for her death sentence to be reduced. The court had recommended commuting her sentence to 15 years, arguing that her actions were less severe than those of her co-defendants, Gerda Steinhoff and Jenny Wanda Bachmann. Additionally, Becker had served the shortest tenure at the camp. The Polish president refused to pardon her, and on July 4, 1946, Elisabeth Becker was executed. The execution took place at Biskupia Górka, where a large crowd of 200,000 gathered to witness. Becker and the other condemned guards were brought out, and as preparations were made, she was placed on a truck under the gallows. The noose was put around her neck, and after the final arrangements, the truck drove off, leaving her hanging. Within minutes, Elisabeth Becker was pronounced dead. At just 22 years old, she was held responsible for the deaths of at least 30 women due to her role in the gas chamber selections. Her execution was seen as justice for the cruelty and brutality she inflicted, and the large crowd witnessed her punishment as a reminder of her war crimes. Jenny Wanda Bachmann, The Execution of the Beautiful Spectre. Born on May 30, 1922, Jenny Wanda Bachmann was from Hamburg and grew up in a modest household. Raised by her father, a dock worker, and her mother, a housewife, the family struggled financially. As a child, Jenny dreamed of becoming an actress and pursued a career in fashion modeling after her schooling. Noted for her appearance, she continued working in the fashion industry even after World War II began, participating in photo shoots and advertisements. In early 1944, Bachmann's life took a drastic turn. She abandoned her modeling career after responding to an advertisement from the German SS seeking women for work in concentration camps. At just 21, she might have been motivated by financial gain, career advancement, or a desire for power. After passing her interview, she trained as an overseer and was assigned to the Stutthof concentration camp, known for its extreme brutality. Upon her arrival at Stutthof, Bachmann quickly exhibited her brutal nature. She gained a reputation for extreme cruelty, beating inmates to near death before sending them to the gas chambers. Her sadistic behavior earned her nicknames like Mad Jenny and the Beautiful Spectre. Bachmann was involved in the daily selection process, deciding who would be sent to the gas chambers and personally responsible for many deaths, including those of women and children. As World War II neared its end and the Soviet Red Army advanced, Bachmann attempted to evade capture. She managed to avoid arrest until May 1945, when she was apprehended while boarding a train in Gdańsk. Despite her attempts to downplay her actions and portray herself as a benefactor, descriptions from survivors and evidence from the camp painted a grim picture of her brutality. A prison guard initially sympathized with her, but upon witnessing the suffering she caused, he refused to release her. At her trial, numerous witnesses testified against her, and evidence of her cruelty was presented. Bachmann's defense argued she was insane and unfit for trial, but she appeared composed, often preoccupied with her appearance rather than her crimes. Her plea for clemency was denied, and she was sentenced to death. After she was found guilty, she declared, "Life is indeed a pleasure, and pleasures are usually short." On July 4, 1946, she was executed along with other convicted war criminals at Biskupia Górka Hill near Gdańsk. Over former Stutthof, prisoners volunteered to conduct the executions. Jenny Wanda Bachmann, only 24 at the time of her execution, had traded a potential career in modeling or acting for a life of violence and cruelty. She became infamous for her sadistic actions and was remembered alongside other notorious Holocaust guards like Irma Grace, Johanna Bormann, and Elizabeth Falkenrath. The true motives behind her descent into such brutality remain unclear. From housemaids to war criminals, the violent rise of female camp guards. Gerda Steinhoff was born on January 29, 1922, in Danzig. She had a modest upbringing and worked as a housemaid on a local farm during her teenage years. After finishing school, she worked in a bakery in Danzig from 1939 and later became a tram conductor. In 1944, Steinhoff married and had a child. That same year, she responded to a Nazi call for new concentration camp guards, as many former guards had been sent to fight on the front lines. Steinhoff underwent training at the Stutthof concentration camp and joined its staff on October 1, 1944, as a block leader, overseeing a group of female prisoners. Stutthof, which had originally opened as a camp for forced labor, became a concentration camp in 1942. Initially surrounded by barbed wire and consisting of 8 barracks, the camp expanded significantly, adding new barracks, crematoria, and gas chambers by 1943. The camp's conditions were harsh, with thousands of prisoners dying from starvation, disease, and typhus epidemics. Many were executed daily by shooting, gassing, phenol injections, beatings, or drowning in mud. Prisoners were also exploited for forced labor in various industries.
We were first in a barrack together. Most of the barracks were a wooden stable. You've seen that, 3 people to a bunk. In the center there were 4 bunks. The horse blanket, the gray blankets that we called horse blankets, were so rough. In any case, you got 1 to a bunk. You do me a favor and tell me how you share that, 3 people to a bunk. Nobody knew how to share it. The number of inmates decreased. People died like flies. We were again faced with this lack of water, lack of lavatories. There were latrines right over in the fields. They were just holes in the ground. You couldn't see in the dark. You were afraid to fall into them. It was slippery, especially when the winter came and it all froze over. You got a mug of coffee. I always say this black water that was called coffee, and after that you saved some to wash yourself. You have very good intentions at first. You really think you are going to rinse your mouth. Dental hygiene is very important. It wasn't then because you actually need the fluid in your body, so cleanliness goes to hell. Food you haven't got that would sustain you. After the first couple of days, you were being lined up to go to work, or by that time some looked worse again, and so the number got smaller. It was again right, left, right, left.
Steinhoff quickly demonstrated her brutality. She was known for her cruelty and sadism, often beating prisoners severely before sending them to the gas chambers. She was involved in the selection process that determined which prisoners would be sent to their deaths. By December 1, 1944, Steinhoff was reassigned to a subcamp of Stutthof, known as Bromberg OST, located 105 miles south of Danzig. There, she was awarded a medal for her service to the Nazi regime. However, she continued to be a brutal overseer, known for whipping and beating prisoners. As the war drew to a close, Steinhoff abandoned her post and returned home to her family. She was eventually captured by Polish authorities on May 25, 1945, following the liberation of the camp. During the first Stutthof trial, witnesses testified about her brutality and involvement in the selections. Despite her relatively short tenure as a guard, Stutthof was found guilty of crimes against humanity. On July 4, 1946, Stutthof was executed at Biskupia Górka Hill in Gdańsk. Along with other condemned guards, she was taken to the site, placed on a truck, and led to the gallows. The noose was secured around her neck, and she was left to hang before a large crowd. At just 24 years old, Stutthoff's brutal actions had earned her a place among the most notorious female war criminals of World War II, remembered alongside figures like Elisabeth Falkenrath, Irma Gracer, and Johanna Bormann. Wanda Klaff, born Wanda Kalasinski, on March 6, 1922, near Danzig, was one of the camp's staff. Her parents were German, with her father working on the railways. The family changed their surname to Klaff in 1941. Wanda had a typical upbringing, completing her schooling and working in a jam factory until 1942. After briefly leaving work to become a housewife following her marriage, she returned to work as a streetcar operator due to financial need. In 1944, Klaff responded to a call from the SS seeking guards for concentration camps. She was recruited, trained at Stutthof, and then assigned to a subcamp named Proust, located in a nearby small town. There, she was known for her brutality, regularly whipping and assaulting the women prisoners. In October 1944, she was transferred to another subcamp in a small village, where she continued her harsh treatment of the approximately 300 women forced to perform strenuous labor. As Soviet forces approached, a large-scale evacuation of Stutthof and its subcamps began. Around 50,000 prisoners were marched towards the sea, where many were shot by machine guns. It's estimated that 25,000 prisoners died during these evacuations. Some guards, including Klaff, attempted to use the chaos as an opportunity to escape responsibility for their actions. Wanda Klaff was arrested on June 11, 1945, and held in a Polish prison, where she contracted typhoid fever, but survived. She was later tried at the Stutthof trials, alongside other former guards, such as Jenny Wanda Bachmann, Gerda Steinhoff, and Elizabeth Becker. Klaff was accused of daily beatings and other brutal acts. During the trial, she confessed with a disturbing sense of pride, claiming she struck at least 2 prisoners each day. Her candid admission did not bode well for her, and along with several other guards, Klaff was sentenced to death at the age of 24. After the war, many authorities were perplexed by how such young women could have become so brutal. On July 4, 1946, Wanda Klaff was removed from her prison cell and taken to Biskupia Górka, a large hill in Gdańsk. There, 20,000 spectators gathered to witness the executions of former Stutthof guards. At just 24 years old, Klaff was led to a truck, where she was ordered to sit on a stool. The truck then reversed under a massive set of gallows erected on the hill, allowing the crowd a clear view of the proceedings. As she stood on the stool, a noose was placed around her neck and secured. The truck was then driven forward, and Klaff was hanged. She was left hanging until a doctor declared her dead. Klaff, who had served in the concentration camp for about a year, was executed despite being one of the younger guards. While there were other female guards who had served longer and were never brought to justice, on that day in Gdańsk, Klaff faced the consequences of her actions. The large crowd of 20,000 witnessed her execution, a stark reminder of the brutal legacy of the Stutthof camp. The question of why these women participated in such atrocities has been the subject of much debate. Some historians argue that these women were products of the same indoctrination that affected the male SS guards, while others suggest that the women were motivated by a desire for power and authority in a society that traditionally restricted their roles. Whatever the motivations, the actions of these female guards left an indelible mark on the history of the Holocaust. The public hangings of female guards from Stutthof had a profound impact on post-war Europe's understanding of justice. While some saw the executions as necessary retribution for the horrors of the Holocaust, others questioned whether such brutality was the right response to brutality itself. The female guards, however, became symbols of how the Nazi regime had corrupted not just men, but also women, turning them into perpetrators of violence and cruelty.